Nice to meet you. Molt de gust. Welcome to Barcelona. Benvinguda a Barcelona. I don't know, Nonny, if I could ask you to raise your arms. A veure si pot aixecar els braços. Ja veieu que els aixeca. Keep them up, because now we'll show the robot. I ara anirem a veure el robot, que ja veieu. Can you move them a little bit more? A veure si els pot moure una mica més. Up and down. Doncs ja veieu que el robot reacciona perfectament amb la Nonny. Nonny, I'm ready to interview you now for a few minutes. Li farem una entrevista a la Nonny per veure què li ha semblat aquesta experiència. You're a journalist, ella és una periodista, i fa una estona entrevistat un científic de Barcelona. You just interviewed a researcher from Barcelona, but in a body of a robot. What was that experience like?
So for me, it started to feel very natural after a while. Occasionally, there's a problem with the microphone, if I move too fast. But beyond that, very quickly, I'm there in Barcelona with you.
So how did I end up in two places at once? How many of you are familiar with this Rape in Cyberspace? This is a much older article, came in a book. And so it was quite a famous story. It was a text-based virtual world, essentially. And somebody was able to hack in and start raping the women in the game. And the women were extremely upset. And, you know, it's kind of an amazing concept that you would be upset about being raped when your only representation is even text-based. I mean, we really are kind of hardwired to adopt our digital sense of presence, of who we are online and who we are in the world. Mel Slater and Mavi Sanchez, researchers in Barcelona and also jointly here at UCL, call it rare responses if real. I often show this image here, which, I don't know if it's got a clicker, it doesn't really matter. That guy's seeing himself, those goggles show the video stream. So he's seeing himself from behind. So when they bring a hammer down in front of that video camera, he jumps. He sees himself as if he's where he's sitting, not where he's actually sitting, but, you know, we see who we are and where we are from the point of view of which we're standing rather than, you know, where his body actually is. This idea is that we're hardwired to adopt representations of ourselves as real. So I started using this idea about 8 years ago to do something that I call immersive journalism, which is a way to use gaming platforms to tell news stories. My idea is I put the audience on scene, I take real material, photographs, audio, video, and I use it to inform how I build my pieces. And then I take advantage of this sense of presence to give people a feeling of being there. Really, it's not a new idea. There was a journalist named Martha Gellhorn from World War II, and she called it The View from the Ground. And then we had a very famous broadcaster in America called Walter Cronkite, and he made this series called You Are There.
These Texians, as they are called, are Mexican citizens. Their province is part of the Mexican nation, but their difficulties with the central government have steadily increased. Now there is open rebellion.
March 5th, 1836. The siege of the Alamo. You are there.
Yeah, so he commanded you to be there. And you wonder where that voice came from the Cyber Wars movie? Well, there's this, the source of it, right? It all starts back in 1957. In any case, similar ideas surfaced in documentary games. JFK Reloaded, people know this one who haven't heard me talk about this before. You played the shooter from the book depository. You know, it was a huge questions about whether there was a conspiracy or what really happened. So in this game, they just let you play the shooter. And once somebody made the actual shot from the angle, they took the game off, and it was an idea of how do you deal with what really happened that day. In the George Bush, John Kerry presidential debate, there was a question about whether he deserved his medal, and this one you for being a swift boat operator in Vietnam, and this one you played John Kerry, and you could figure out for yourself, did he deserve the medal? 9/11 survivor, you just essentially played a victim. This was made by a couple of students. One guy described being up at night gaming at 3 in the morning, had his TV on, and began to see the people jump from the building. They took a gaming platform and they stripped out all the guns and the shooting and everything else to make this game. And actually they were sued by the gaming company and lost and had to pay $30,000 hacking into the system. But the other developer said, the game is not really a game at all. It keeps no score or actual track of time. It's merely a moment caught in time. And I think that's what you try to do in journalism. One of the first pieces I built was a virtual Guantanamo Bay prison. I had made a documentary about all the civil liberties issues in America post 9/11. Particularly, I had a big segment on Gitmo. God, I just cannot believe that it's still open these many years later. So it started out in Second Life. It got rebuilt in Unity for the Moscow Museum of Modern Art last June, a year ago June. And again, the idea was that, this is a place that's off limits to most citizens and press, so we made an accessible version. Give you an idea of how I try to stay to the source material. This was a photograph that was smuggled out by an Army soldier on how the detainees were being brought to Gitmo, and this is what happens to you in our build.
As soon as I had put on my orange jumpsuit, I was thrown into the back of a C-17 transport plane and...
You are immediately bound, and then a black hood comes over the vision of your avatar.
Shut up!
We then integrated some sounds that were based on descriptions of what real detainees heard. When the black hood is removed, you find that you're in a cage. Most of the footage is from original Defense Department shots of detainees in Guantanamo Bay.
A replica of Camp Delta will be added to this Camp X-Ray soon. Nonny wants it to include a habeas corpus scheme, enhancing the simulation of a place outside of the law.
Like a regular video game where you get your choices. What do you do now? Call your parents? Call your lawyer? Ask what you're in here for? And the answers are, no, you can't call your parents. No, you can't call your lawyer. Sorry, not allowed to give you that information.
So then the next piece I built, which was with that lab in Barcelona with Mel and Mavi, was I had a lot of Freedom of Information Act material that was released about the detainees and how they're being kept in stress positions. But, as the journalism would report, they had to, be in the stress position for 3 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours. But what did that really mean? So we decided to try to take these interrogation logs and use them to inform a piece. And the logs were from a guy that the Bush administration had said had been tortured, so there was no, enhanced interrogation. Everybody was calling it torture in this particular case. And again, a video to really help you understand. So this back in the days when we still called these goggles head-mounted display. Those are the wide 5. So the way that we did this is we'd sit you in a room, and you would look at this avatar who's in this stress position. And then the avatar would fade, and you'd find yourself in this room, and then you turn your head and see a virtual mirror. People are wearing a breathing strap, so they're breathing at the same time as the avatar. And then when you look down and around, you'd start to realize that your body was sort of in this stress position. And the audio, which if somebody knows about binaural recording, we used a system that allowed us to act as if the interrogation was going through another room and you're hearing it through a wall. As you can see, this is how people were sitting upright with their hands behind their back. But after the 10 minutes of doing this experience, we asked people what were their bodies like, and literally everybody reported they were hunched over in a stress position. And that's when I realized how incredibly strong the sense of embodiment can be using virtual reality. So, of course, the biggest questions are, integrity. I'm giving people a subjective experience. What does that mean journalistically? And this video came out after we made that piece, and it was actually an English one. And I think our interrogation logs, we just used we took logs that said, sit down, stand up. And the sergeants told the detainee to sit down, stand up. And we had an actor read it in an active voice. Could you turn the volume up, please? And this is what really was going on. Anyway, you sort of get the idea that I think that our portrayal was not so far off. I was working as a research faculty at the journalism school at the University of Southern California, and we decided to do what I now would consider a traditional report on the web, photographs, text, video, audio, and I wanted to do an immersive piece. So I started recording audio at food banks, and I had an intern helping me. Now, remember all these pieces, I had no money, right? I had this crazy idea about building stuff in virtual reality, and believe me, people thought it was crazy. I mean, I had colleagues stand up and point at me and say, "You can't do that, that doesn't work." Well, guess what, guys, it does work. In any case, the food bank line on the left was the real food bank line. This is what we built here. The people in that right, my virtual one, were actually donated. This is how I did this sort of stuff. I got virtual humans donated. And what happens in that long line is the guy goes into a diabetic coma because he's, can't get food in time. These are some images from Sundance of people crouching down near him because it feels so real. And here's a video to give a better idea. Going to the volume down. Volume down. Sorry, not mixed that well, but. Okay, he's having a seizure. Okay. So I had to motion capture a reenactment of the whole thing. I had to choreograph, had one guy helping me. But now you can see, here's somebody in the goggles, and they're fully tracked, which is what those red lights are. So they can walk around freely, no controllers. And for him, the body's real. He's being very careful not to step on the body. I mean, he knows he's in this room, but he actually feels like he's there too. Looking at the woman on the phone. You can turn the audio down now, please. So you can see that for him, that guy's seizure is happening there. He's really careful not to step on his body as this thing goes on. And I have to tell you, sometimes people would try and walk through the virtual humans. No one ever walked through that body. I premiered this at Sundance, and I just didn't know what was going to happen. And you can kind of hear the surprise in my voice. You can turn the volume up, please. So what do you think? Oh, you're crying. You're crying. Gina, you're crying. So you can see I was really astonished. And this has happened over and over and over again, of tears and emotion and intensity. Just a quick hat tip, she mentioned the Oculus Rift. This is Palmer Luckey. Palmer was our lab assistant at the time, and these were the prototypes. Oh, it's not going to start to the beginning of the video, is it? Let me go back one so you can see. Those are the duct tape goggles that we took to Sundance with us, and Palmer was the guy who drove my truck across and crashed in our hotel room. And so this is where we were starting out, from that wide five, the big head-mounted display, to these guys that went with me to Sundance. We didn't even know if the goggles were going to work. Anyway, the next piece I did was funded by Tribeca, Associated Press, Google, called Use of Force. And it told the story of this man who was brought to the U.S. as a young man, a teenager. And, of course, never had papers, so he worked construction. 27 years, never in trouble. Had no work during the downturn. Stole a bottle of tequila and a steak for his wife on Mother's Day, got arrested, got deported. The Border Patrol officer who caught him when he snuck back in beat him up pretty severely. And when he complained to the supervisor, rather than do anything about it, the supervisor sent him into a dark pen. And for years, they claimed that, literally 2 years, they claimed he'd resisted arrest until 2 grainy cell phone videos emerged. It was this man begging for his life. And they beat and they tased him to death. And, the thing about my work is I tend to try to make the invisible visible. We rebuilt that whole area. And I brought a witness in, a young woman witness. I'll show you some things about her. And she was up on this bridge. And I brought her to my lab, and I scanned her in order to make models of her. And I brought her in and had her motion captured and facial captured, so that when she did her own reenactment, rather than my saying to her, okay, tell me what happened that day, she reenacted it with her body. What did she do? What did she yell? What did she say? And I put that in the piece. And this is her in the left-hand corner, and she's actually overseeing this other piece of video, which shows that there's actually multiple people involved in the beating and tasing of this man, multiple officers. Very actually brave young woman, because she's been under a lot of stress from lawyers from the Border Patrol for her speaking out. But to give you an idea that, she's up on this bridge, and we rebuilt the 2 scenes, one on the ground and one from up above. And at Tribeca, you can see people are trying to lean over the edge of that bridge to see better, and over and over and over. In fact, that's Locke. And that sense of presence I keep talking about, I will continue to show you stuff about that, but it is incredibly effective. And I keep repeatedly being astonished at how, even with some of the graphics, where I've had very small budgets, my budgets are getting better. So even with some of the graphics being somewhat gamey, game-like, you might say, the sense of presence on a scene is so strong that it really is an effective way to tell these stories. After the head of the World Economic Forum came through my lab and did hunger, he took off the goggles and turned to me and said, "Can you build something on Syria?" And I took material from where a bomb explodes in Aleppo when a young girl is singing, and I put you on scene there, and then I sent a team to a refugee camp on the border of Syria and Iraq and collected more material. But again, here's something to give you some idea. For the kids, again, we tried to put them in as themselves as best that we could. These are all things that it's kind of Wild West. Nobody's been building these things before, so I think all of us will be able to figure out as we go along. It's going to get better and better. At the World Economic Forum, I had everybody from Peter Gabriel to John McCain go through it, so it was really a huge Syrian faction, which was really great. It then went to the V&A here last June. It was in the tapestries room, which was kind of cool to have my VR cameras up against these old storytelling techniques. 54 pages of notes from visitors in the visitor guidebook. Curators told me they'd never had such a response. Pretty amazing for me to see once again that audience. People were just walking in. It wasn't advertised well, from all over the world, all age groups. And I can only say, once again, this stuff really works. In order to support my human rights habit, fortunately, I'm getting other commissions like this one for the Singapore Formula One race, which we just launched a couple weeks ago, where we put you on scene at the track. We rebuilt the entire Formula One buildings, streets, et cetera, and you end up in the crazy busyness of the pit, and then you end up getting to drive the car. And then at the end, I got to get those people out in 4 minutes so I can get some other people in. There's a crash, but it was a real hat tip to, if any of you have seen the F1 documentary, where basically the drivers and they got together and refused to drive unless the cars were made safer because so many people were dying. And since that time, no one has been killed. And in this particular case, it was a crash, and afterwards the drivers check on each other and make sure they're okay. And I choreographed that and motion captured that scene, so you witness that at the end of the experience. Here's a kid going through it. He's in the pit. Once again, trying to touch people. It all feels like he's there on scene. So there you go. A+, right? This is a kid who games all the time. Totally different experience. You can see he's just completely in there and through it. And I want to call one thing about this, as you talk about branding and marketing and et cetera, it's undivided attention. And there's no turning to your phone or your friend or your TV or your distraction. You are in that space. And I think that makes it a really interesting place to tell narrative. People often ask, well, VR crashed once. Why is it, now the time for VR, the way that I would argue? It's pretty obvious. High-speed internet, we can do things very quickly. People can have access to these stories very quickly. Processing power since 20 years since the last time of the boom, 8,000 times faster. That means that when I put you in those goggles and you turn your head this way or you turn your head that way, you're just indiscernible. That, in fact, is just the screen changing. You just don't see any lag, and it tricks your body and your mind to feeling like you're there. And then the cost. These were $50,000 goggles just 5 years ago, and of course now you have the Oculus Rift. Finally, just to say, I build these walk-around experiences. It's very easy. In 6 minutes, I can build an Oculus version, or I can do a mobile version. We were doing mobile viewers. That's me at Google showing them my viewers and giving them to them. And then that's their new cardboard one, a couple years that they just put out for $30. And of course, Samsung and Oculus are together. Lots of fast turnaround techniques now where you can just take photographs and have 3D models sent back to you. Hard with people to animate them, but if you want to make, your environment, you can do that very quickly now in VR. And my final notes in conclusion, this is a really interesting embodied medium. It is, I say also, sorry, whoops. Obviously digital, that allows us to reflect and engage with our world, our reality. And when I took data, I can tell you that consistently, people report that the experience feels like reality to them. And I think that's a very persuasive way to tell story and rhetoric. Thank you very much.